I'll get into the game first. Welcome, everyone. This is a best of 3 TvZ from the most recent Korean Open Cup, played in the round of 16. So a little earlier on in the tournaments, but already some really cool players that, of course, I will talk about and why they're cool. Also, quite older players. Don't mean to be rude with that, just that they are two players coming back from the military. We'll see how they look in this matchup. In the bottom right of Gressfon, it is Ryung. The top left, we have soO. So both players having their heydays in StarCraft 2 a while ago at this point, actually. Still really great guys. Still interested in the StarCraft, obviously. soO, I mean, I guess you could kind of say a little less so. Just kind of the rumors were that he wasn't putting so many hours into it. Whereas Ryung, even when he was in military, anytime that he had a break or he would join on stream and co-commentate with Crank, or he would be, you know, a wise elder for some of the Terrans to message and get some advice on. And then when he did come back from the military, he was just right into the content creation again on the Korean streams, and then also playing. But he wasn't really, you know, there was no like big hoopla about him returning and how far he could get and stuff like that. So he kind of almost snuck into our field of vision when it came to the, you know, best players who have returned from military. But Ryung, probably most well known for his infamous Imba against Sniper, I believe, in one of the GSLs, where he lost in the semifinals against Broodlord and Fester because it was super stupid. And that was probably when he was playing his best. So he was kind of a child of Boxer, I think was one of his nicknames back when he was on Slayers. Not exactly a super, you know, good exit from Slayers, so it's a little dramatic. I wouldn't call them that anymore. But anyways, he was one of the more promising Terrans, just kind of that crop that was there back in like 2012, which back then there were so many. And he's still really, really good now. But he's really good at TVT and TVP, not so good at TvZ. So whereas soO, his heyday was back in, you know, even actually as recently as 2019, doesn't really feel that long ago, 2018, he has not come back with quite as much a vengeance, and I don't think he's making as many, you know, appearances content-wise either, but his play is still solid, and I think that his EVT still has that sparks of inspiration that he used to have when he was a more higher placing professional gamer. Now, Ryung did do a scout, saw there was a pool first. It was actually pool and gas first, so the speed's going to be kicking in maybe a little bit faster. But Ryung, with that scout, was able then to kind of change up his build a little bit for it. So we actually went into Reaper, Marine, then Reactor. So it's a fairly delayed Reactor. The factory's not going to swap off to it anytime soon, so you can see this huge delay that you wouldn't see if it was a not Marine build. If it was Reaper in Reactor or Reaper Marine in Reactor. And that means that even a handful of Speedlings, which did come in, can kill the two Marines. If Ryung had been perfectly positioned and perfectly microed, it would have been a little different, but I think he was just a little surprised. The Reaper also came back a little bit late to help out, and so 3 SCVs go down before the Hellions even start to produce. Bit of a bummer, but Ryung is going into 3 CC. So soO did open up less economically, for sure. And his reward was kind of limited. You know, 2 Marines and 3 SCVs is not super great. And especially since there will be no follow-up in which to punish Ryung's 3CC. And soO also doesn't know about the 3CC, so that didn't get him information. It does open up the opportunity, I guess, for the Overlord to come in now that the Marines are dead, so there is the information. 3rd CC is witnessed, 2 barracks are witnessed, that's all you really need to know, so soO sends that Overlord back to a safer location. You know it's a 3CC 211 build. Expect the Marine drop around 5:30 at this point. And soO has that time to build drones, build up a queen count, things you'd usually be doing as a Zerg player anyways, and then around 5 minutes or 5:15 or whatever it is to really perfectly hit that timing, you would start to bust out a bunch of lings. Unless you try and get a run by in. So that could be another option against someone doing this, because you know most of the time they're going to pick up those Marines and leaving their home very unguarded. So the difference is that Ryung doesn't stop building Hellions. He didn't build very many from the initial factory production. He didn't go up to 6 like you might expect. He added that second barracks. But he built 2, swapped, and then continued building Hellions. Something that he actually, I'm pretty sure he invented, but years ago. This is actually an old school build from Ryung. A 3cc build in a 211 where you don't swap the reactor onto the starport. You keep it on the factory, which is, you know, is usually used as just like an add-on hopper. Now you leave it there, you build the Hellions, and you show up with Hellbats. This isn't about that 530 drop, in which case you can see there's not that many Marines. There's not enough medevacs to do a double drop. It's about the push. And the armory is finishing up. The Hellions on the front line. More reinforcements will come, right? The Hellions producing fairly quickly. Traveling across the map fairly quickly. Going right into a second factory and a third factory, too. Ryung bringing out the bio into mech swap. Hot diggity damn. Okay, that's new for him. But Ryung, even if he might not be the greatest at this particular matchup right now, he is definitely always an innovative Terran. Very fun guy to watch. And wouldn't be the first to try this out, but if it works, then he'd be one of the only ones who actually makes it work. Now the Hellbats arrive with the Stimmed Marines. You can see how that will cut through the Queens in a way that a typical Hellbat attack just wouldn't do. Obviously the Lings can't help out against those Hellbats, and I do not see any Banelings. A Baneling is done, but no Banelings are on the way, making this an extremely difficult hold. A few Banelings might not be enough because the Marines can target fire, the Hellbats can split, but it's really the best option for it. And finally 9 are on the way, and 9's probably a good number. 11 drones have already gone down, though. A lot of panic for soO, a lot of disruption to his build order, to his creep spread. This is still a very effective opener from Ryung, but it really is an opener. You know, this is... Opener is kind of a vague word in StarCraft anyways. You think about opener, maybe you think the first 4 minutes of the game, first 5 minutes maybe. Maybe you think the 3cc was the opener, but in this way, because this actually transitions over into mech, it's like this whole thing has been the opener, right? This is the real meat and potatoes of what Ryung wanted to do. I want to go into battle mech afterwards. So soO has no idea about this. I'm gonna guess still doesn't know to anticipate it, even if Ryung has done this before. And so his mental preparation will be completely non-existent, and his actual unit composition will be incorrect. Well, more so than you're hoping for. Ling Baneling can probably cover the first couple of engagements if you do it well enough, but you would want to have Roaches and Ravagers with their range, especially helping you out. And you're not at all threatening, I think, in terms of an engagement on the other side of the map with this composition, too. So Ryung could feel very, very comfortable back at home with just a couple of tanks, focus on the micro of his battle mech, do a couple of drops with his bio that it has stim, right? It's not just kind of a flimsy 8 Marine drop, no stim. That would rip through a drone line. I feel like Ryung has definitely got soO here. 4th base already done on location, something this Ling, I think, barely scouted before it died. And that probably feels kind of bad, just because you know that they're going to get away with it. They're not going to be able to punish it. Still hasn't seen that it is a battle mech composition either. So soO still doesn't have a Roachborn. He's trying to go up to a Hive, though, by looks of things, which would be a fine option. A couple of Vipers could help out, but again, at this point, I would say that once he figures it out... Oh, you know, he probably did figure it out. Well, the Cyclones, I think this might be their first appearance. They weren't out on the map quite yet. They were trying to get on the map, so soO kind of inadvertently hits Ryung at a kind of perfect time. Oh my god, the SCVs. Oh my god, the SCVs. Oh my god. Okay. 13 SCVs go down, a couple of supply depots, the tanks went down, and a handful of kind of miscellaneous other units, some Marines, some Hellbats too. This was the best case scenario for soO. The fact that Ryung was not at all prepared for an engagement is the only reason this engagement looks as good as it does. The 2 tanks are siege, blast holes into the Baneling Baneling center. Kills tons of Banelings. Even if soO tried to go oh shit, tanks, and then try to spread a little bit more, it's still off creep. So Ryung's got the tanks shooting, he's got the Hellions, you know, as Hellbats, so they can tank and spread both. The Marines pull back behind everything that's tankier than them. The Cyclones are able to be microed away from getting surrounded. You know, all that type of stuff happens. But because soO attacks, as Ryung was not expecting it, this has reset Ryung's momentum. His plan, no doubt, was to hit soO in a better location with tanks anchoring before soO had really figured out what was going on. But then soO just opened up this whole opportunity for him, and Baneling Baneling is going to do okay in a game like this, where Ryung has, again, lost all that momentum. Now, Ryung still has 4 bases and is trying to finish up his 5th as well, but soO has a lot more playgrounds than I was giving him credit for a few minutes ago. He has his bases, he has his creep, he has a large amount of Baneling. And he's actually going ahead and going up to the Hive, Hydralisk Den, and possibly Lurkers. And he could also go into Infestors, so that's what I was going to discuss before that big moment there, as we witnessed 29 SCVs go down and the Planetary. That was a heavy cost for soO, though. Keep that in mind. Supplies not so great for the Zerg right now. Actually, that did a mistake. Third CC also went down, though, so I'm just blinds. Hello? Third CC went down, too? Oh my god, Ryung's totally all in. Anyways, I'm going to try and fit this in before things get too exciting. The Infestors with Fungal will be so helpful against the Battle Lake composition, but they were never made. soO remakes enough Lings and enough Banelings to maybe try to hold on, but the Hellbats do their job tanking. The Cyclones are left over, and the Lings do love tackling only Cyclones. Heavily reinforcing to get here ASAP. They do try and arrive, but already a few Cyclones have taken their losses, and the other Cyclones that were bopping Queens. Is that important that they're bopping Queens? I'm not so sure. As long as they're buying that time, soO needs to get more Lings and Banelings on the front lines, and I guess the problem is that the Queens were pulled this entire time. They're not injecting, but it's not a big enough problem. Ryung taps out, realizing that the momentum probably isn't there, but damn was it close. It was actually really close to being the last hurrah, because soO's larva was going to be an issue. It's soO barely able to make that work. And Ryung, who I thought was doing so damn well, it turned on its head so quickly. 180 in the blink of an eye. But GG's, soO takes game 1. After a ultimately failed attempt to make bio into mech work. In the bottom right, down a game now, he is Ryung. And at the top right, we have soO. It's too bad, man. I really want bio into mech to be a thing, or vice versa, but it mostly isn't. And things like spooky mech with ghosts doesn't really count. People who aren't familiar with Brood War might not really understand why it could be cool. Because just at face value, if you're a StarCraft 2 only player and you were told, well, you do bio or you do mech, that's how it is. You may not explore any other options. I'd just be like, oh yeah, okay, that's how it is. Fair enough. There's still a lot of other things that can change it up and make interesting games. But the thing is, people I think get really excited for it because it was a thing in Brood War. So you could go bio into mech. I believe... Actually, I'm not sure what it was called. I don't think it had a name. I think it was just... You know, for a while, it was just the way he played. And I think mech into bio also might have been a thing, but that I'm less sure about, actually. It's been a long time, honestly, because not only have I not really been invested into Brood War since, you know, Pro League was cut and all that stuff. I only watch it occasionally, you know, when TvZ casts it. It also was a thing a while ago. I think right now, more popular is, for instance, in TvZ, going for bio into double pumped vessels. So I believe that's called the SK Terran. Anyways, so I'm like now at this point kind of vaguely familiar with it. But anyways, it was really cool when the Brood War players came over in that mixed Pro League and thereafter, some of them did try it. They were bringing some of their ideas because, you know, StarCraft 2 has plenty of ideas that did end up working out that were influenced or even directly related to something that happened in Brood War. So Fantasy, who was an excellent Brood War player, actually really one of the best by the time Brood War swapped over, would try this in StarCraft 2. Now, Fantasy never was capable of becoming one of the best StarCraft 2 players, but he was definitely one of those innovative guys, kind of, I guess, like Ryung. But Ryung actually, I think, had a higher placement for a while. Anyways, again, I'm getting too involved in the history. He would try it. It really wouldn't work out. When it did work out, it was probably more so because of how the early game went. You know, even if the Zergs ended up being surprised and they went, oh shit, you're going into mech? I didn't realize this. They still wouldn't die. It'd be totally dependent on whether the, you know, the Henlian opening did a bunch of damage, something like that. So it's never really been a thing. But I love when people try it. You know, and Ryung, more kudos to him doing it. I think the follow-up could have been so cool. If we had seen those tanks actually arrive on the other side of the map in position where Ryung was intending to position them with the battle mech army, I think we would have really been applauding a very, very cool move. But instead, he got bopped at the exact wrong moment for him. And we're getting a game 2. With soO up 1, but Ryung is not done with the trickiness. Double starport on the way. Extremely expensive build. Double pumped. Oh, Banshees, actually, I think. So if it's double pumped battle cruisers, I'm pretty sure you need both gases. Like, I'm 99% sure. But you can't really do anything else, too, when you go for double battle cruiser. I think you can literally produce 2 Hellions, but then you have to stop producing Hellions. When Gumiho does the double battle cruiser, again, I think it goes command center first into a 1-1-2. But then, again, 2 Hellions, no SCV scout, no Reaper, maybe a it's like super bare bones, very greedy build. This does end up being that starport for Banshee production. So, yeah, 1 gas, not as greedy everywhere else that we're looking. Ryung is maybe messing up a little bit on the macro as he's handling 4 Lings at a time as awkwardly as possible. Not his fault. soO's just doing something really unorthodox. The Viking did pop out to clear out the Overlord, so soO will not know exactly what's going on. He sees a faster 3rd gas, though, and that is a sign. That is a potential tell. I'm not sure what else on 2 bases gets this fast of a 3rd gas. Because basically that 3rd gas this fast means that it's not a 3rd CC. But like a Hellbat Outland I don't think requires a 3rd gas. So either soO is confused or he knows that it's double Banshee. And since double Banshee has made itself a little more popular since the patch a month and a half ago at this point, he might know exactly what it is, but so far not. So far not, man. Those spores on the way. And perhaps more importantly, nothing to defend against these Hellions. 7 drones get barbecued and scout in the main, perhaps? Yeah, one last second scout here. Last second scout, there you go. Sees the roaches, sees the lair. What those Hellions saw were no spores in the mineral lines, and soO has no idea what he's facing. He might think it's like a battle mech build. I guess if you're going into like fast 2 factory, you might need the gas. Even maybe like the Woodamine drop opener does it too. But whatever, there is something else because soO is just not identifying this at all. So I'm going to assume that he is thinking another build that has this fast for 3rd gas, and he is going to be crushed when he realizes it's a bunch of Banshees. Already with their speed done, Cloak is on the way. The roaches offensively are going to buy some time. Honestly, Ryung should probably just let these be handled by an SCV pool or something, but I guess he was afraid because there was Lings involved too. And then go across the map and try and do maximum damage. Even though these won't find the mineral lines unguarded like I was fearing, they still, by their merit of being such a surprise, already in higher numbers, soO is, again, reeling. Alright, so it's kind of a similar situation to last game, where he did end up surviving against that Marine Hellbat push, despite being surprised by it. But I would say that he was still not in a good position. Yeah, he ended up winning that first game, but because of other things happening. So this one should be very uncomfortable for soO as well. That said, uncomfortable doesn't mean dying. Ryung could find very little further success with these Banshees, and then imagine 7 Banshees, expensive as they are with a double starport opener, being almost useless. Like, that would be bad. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's inevitable that the Banshees do more damage. They find more queens, they clear up a ton of creep, they find the drones, they stop the 4th base from building, all that good stuff. But soO is doing a good job denying them. Because the lair is done, and lair is well timed, the Overseer has been available. Double Overlord drop. So I guess soO was planning on doing a... Wait, when did he make those? I totally missed that. Well, that could turn into, what do they call it, the German taxi or whatever? It could turn into exactly this. So he might have done that as soon as he saw the Banshees, and I just missed it. So the queens come over to deal with the Banshees, and the roaches deal with anything else that's been created, which is not much, because this is such a dedicated build. So only 2 tanks at this point in time. The Hellions, somewhat helpful, but not super helpful. But that is so many Banshees, dude. That is 8 Banshees against 10 Queens. Queens that can't transfuse. You know, you could start spreading creep with these Overlords, but it's going to take a little while to affect the whole area. And well, that... Yeah, Jesus. Oh my god, the Queens died so quickly. Oh my god. They stood no chance. And soO was all in with this. He was all in. I definitely don't mind the idea, but I think the execution ended up being really haphazard because it was a last-second thing. Because he went, oh shit, Banshees, let me think about what I should do against that. Well, this sounds like a good idea. Oh, but should I also build, like, you know, 7 Spore Crawlers? Yeah, the Banshees now just killing all the rest of the Queens. No Spire to contest with that. GG. Ryung wins. Game number 2. So all tied up now. Moving on to Babylon to determine who moves on in what was the Korean Open Cup. At the bottom right, he is Ryung. On the top left, he is soO. So I took a lot of last game to talk about how Ryung's bio in a mech was cool, but just not usually a great idea. Last game, we do have that double Banshee opener sneaking its way into a few best of 3s, best of 5s versus Zerg, and yet not often enough that soO was anticipating it. Because I think if you get that scout, you should be running the checklist as a Zerg player what it could be. And it just seemed to me that at no point did soO on the checklist have double port Banshee written down, you know? So he didn't even skip over, he just didn't have it written down. So he checked off a bunch of other items on the list and then went, oh shit, it's Banshees. And his reaction, his build to it, I think is a fine build against it. Maybe. I can't even say that confidently. I haven't seen too many of the double Banshee openers versus the Queen drop. But, you know, in that case, it was not good at all. So Ryung really is trying to win this series against soO with trickery, which is not usually as... Well, tricks are never dependable, I suppose, but they're definitely not as capable of finishing a game as the other matchups, I think. Particularly TVP. This is very mechanical. And Ryung's mechanics, I don't know if they're really in question, because you watch his TVP, and he might have some interesting openers, but it's not like it's totally dependent on being super cheesy. He really, his highlight for TVP is his Marauder production and ability to get surrounds. It's quite mechanical. In TVT, yeah, he just is really... He's got a big brain for TVT. But for some reason, TvZ, I think for him, it just trips him up. Just trips him up. He can't really determine how to, like, really maneuver in that mid-game or late game. So it still remains his worst matchup. That was displayed at Katowice most recently. For soO, like I was saying earlier, I think it might still be one of his better ones, even though it is very mechanical. And one of the things that they say about returning to StarCraft is that your mechanics take that hit, right? He seems to be doing fine enough in it. And I think soO, at the end of the day, is still very much like he was before he went to military, which is a real mid-game macro machine. So that's been shining a bit more, as he did win that first game despite being tricked. And we'll see if it wins out in this third game on Babylon, which people would usually point out as being a little Terran favored. 3cc build from Ryung, actually. But he did turn this into a bit of a trick in the first game, so we'll see if he does it again. For soO, he has tried throwing in a little bit of that early aggression. He's tried to throw off Ryung a little bit. I would say they really haven't worked. As far as the early pool gas in the first game, didn't think it really worked. And then in the second game, those earlier roaches that ran into a bunch of Banshees. That didn't work either. But it seems maybe it's just not even going to try any of that this time around and just react to whatever he is seeing, which currently is nothing. But it's not time yet to send that overload anyways. Just kind of waiting for Ryung to throw down extra gases or maybe a fusion core. Starport's done. Swaps over. This could be very macro then. A Hellion Banshee opener. Oh, Viking gets produced. Could still be Hellion Banshee. Viking into Banshee is very old school. It has been displayed recently, kind of confusedly. Confusing a lot of pros, because it's not a very streamlined build. it's better just to go into the Banshees if you're going to do something as boring as Hellion Banshee. But it does seem to be Hellion Banshee. Yeah. So the Viking, you know, kills a couple of overlords. It almost always guarantees kills 1, probably 2, maybe 3. And it does clear out them from determining what else is going on. So this can be almost a big brain, you know. Why would they get a Viking? I'm so concerned they got a Viking. What the hell did they get a Viking for? They gonna go to the battle cruisers? What the hell, man? And it's actually just Banshees. But can't think of anything else you go for a Viking first. It's not usually Viking into Liberator, just right into Liberator. Yeah, it does clear out overlords for drops in the future, which was one of its first highlights years ago in StarCraft. The Pult Viking, it clears out the overlords, genius. Yeah. So that might be more so why it's kind of coming back, especially when it does come to some of these old school Terran players, is that they are still seeing the reasoning to get a Viking. Again, the 2 overlord kills, the annoyingness to the Zerg players, they realize, oh shit, I have to rebuild overlords. And that they don't have that vision on some of the dead spots of the map. Well, 3CC has finally been scouted, because remember that still hadn't technically happened. Banshees only committed to 1, but with Cloak. Now, I didn't know this when I was casting Katowice, but I did read Oliveira's recap, which was super enlightening, very cool of him to do that stream, and such a good guy to give away most of his money to charity. But apparently, if you don't get the second Banshee, you actually get a faster... Oh my god. If you don't get Cloak, no, that's what it was. If you didn't get Cloak. Well, I wonder if it's the same kind of effect, though. Because he got 2 Banshees and no Cloak, and he ended up talking about that game being better for the push. That you were able to fit in, I think, an extra tank, was it? Or faster armory. Shit, which was one of them? I'm going to have to double check that one. Anyways, but this is 1 Banshee with Cloak, not 2 Banshee. It saves you almost the same amount of money. So I wonder if it's still the same effect. This is where you have to bust out, you know, the 2 or 3 replays that are really, really close to each other so you can directly compare. Damn. Well, moving on. 1 Banshee didn't do anything. It's getting repaired up. It's still helpful as far as scouting and maybe helping with run buys, so there's always that. Although Cloak's not really necessary for that portion of it. Ryung is going up to a total of 8 barracks, so he's going to pile on the pressure, right? It's not really tricky, but you do definitely want to scout this as a Zerg player. It's not a 4th command center, it's 8 racks, first and foremost. And that's a lot of aggression. Typical on Babylon is to push to this bottom section, bring your tank over here, and then abuse it, kind of just with the ability of the Marines to run backwards. So the tank doesn't like hit anything important, right? But it covers your retreat. And if you do get 1 extra tank on the other side... Oh, he's not going to do that, okay. Then that can be a big surprise to the Zerg. But right now, just sending out the Marines to clear up some of that creep. It is definitely going to include a tank push soon. This 8 racks, very intentional, very aggressive. Banshee, dead loss, not intentional. It's kind of a bummer too, because that actually would have been great to cover this particular run-by path. Or over here even, like anywhere. The Banshee is useful. Ryung is going to clear up his own tank. So I've been saying he's been aggressive. I say this map was favored towards Terran. Destroying these rocks does make you get faster across the map. But I don't know if I like this. Ryung's much better than I am, so it doesn't matter what I like. But I don't know. You know, theoretically, what's kind of nice about the setup is that you have only this path to worry about as far as run-bys or engagements go. And while technically as a wall over here, it's a Plot Depot wall, right? You know, Banelings will bust through that. And if you leave this spot open but cover this spot with the rocks, you're pushing directly to the bottom left. When you push this direction, you're pushing in a way that doesn't really hit anything important until it reaches over here, unless you break down these rocks too. And you're pushing into an open area. So like there's so many opportunities for soO to catch you unsieged or to get a huge surround on you, which if you take, you know, a very conservative path to the bottom, you don't have to worry about the bottom, right? The bottom is the end of the map. So that's my thinking. Like I'm not convinced by this, but we might see some reason as to why this is genius. At the end of the day, Ryung is still effectively cutting off a potential run-by point by walling off here. So keeping it down to basically 1, kind of difficult for soO to get all around the map to hit over on this section. And he is still slowly C-chopping and, you know, kind of tightening the noose. It is still kind of scary. Especially because soO looks to be late to his baneling speed. He's almost maxed out and his baneling speed still isn't done. But it will finish before an actual engagement happens. So that's the most important thing. I don't, like, there's not really anything that screams abusive to me for the Terran side of things. You really want to get those tanks all up against a wall and only with 1 or maybe max 2 directions for them to fire if you can. This is all over the place. Not even necessarily covering each other is the thing, too. Not to say it's easy for the Zerg. Not at all. I think plenty of people will fail against defending this because they will come in through an angle that is bad, or they'll macro incorrectly, or, you know, whatever. It's gonna be difficult, but the way I'm thinking, the way I'm predicting it as far as the professional matches that I've seen, watching the Zergs clamp shut on the Terran push, feel like I've seen the Zerg take advantage of this type of setup more often. The Liberators aren't even necessarily all that abusive. Tanks, again, maybe not the best position. They're getting some pretty nice shots, and the Banelings are starting to run thin against the 8 Rax Marines. Look how many Marines are still left over. That is a scary number for soO, who had just expended all of his Banelings, close to it. Definitely important to have some Banelings left over so they don't get to pounce on you immediately afterwards, and soO is very aware of that. He does have some Banelings. They do buy some time. More Banelings are on the way. More Lings turning into more Banelings. Now this... Okay, this is an abusive area, but does Ryung have enough? All of his Marines already injured, his tanks trying to get those beautiful shots, but this time around the Banelings are getting more of those connections, and Ryung does not have a huge Marine army suddenly showing up and appearing as soO runs low on his army. He is actually close to having 0 Marines. Close, not quite. He will hold on to his 3rd, and a 4th was built. The bad thing about going 8 racks into a macro game is, of course, a later 4th base, but also the lack of second factory, so your splash potential is quite low. If you are forced to disengage, if momentum completely stops for the Terran, this is when a Zerg player who has defended in such a way. They have not taken economic damage, they do have an army, they still have some creep spread, they're going to add to the infestation pit, they're going to get to hive. The next time you try to move out, even as you do start to rebuild and you do get 2 factories up and running, they're going to have those Vipers. And... not to say that Marine tank can't win against someone with Vipers, but it does get a lot harder. Usually once the Zerg player is up to that hive, Terran player would be also going into 4 base, 5 base, almost turtle into ghost, you know, that type of late game TvZ. And looking at the map when those rocks were broken down, and this spot in particular was abused, okay, I could see how that's really nasty. But I'm still not convinced about going through here. I suppose they're going through here. Well, yeah. Both might have been the same effect, honestly. I'm thinking another replay where it's an 8 racks, heads towards the south. Anywho. Supply depots, not permanent walls. They are going to be broken down. They won't find much else, but already that amount of supply depots being torn down is pretty effective for the Banelings. And soO is actually going to pull the trigger here. Not all the tanks were siege, but this was still a very defensive setup by Ryung. It's still not going to be enough. Ryung's Marines pull back, leaving the tanks mostly unguarded. soO pretty happy about that trade. Killed the command center, killed the workers, killed the tanks, resetting them down to just 2. He is going to lose a hatchery in turn. Did that just make up for everything Ryung has lost there? I would say no, not yet. See if the double drop, effectively double drop now, will do more damage in the main base. Spawning pool wouldn't even be that crucial of a target, I would say. Well, it's exactly what he goes for. He gets it, he escapes, goes over to the right side. Now there's drones there too. And soO is not rebuilding the spawning pool particularly quickly. I think the thing that usually seems to make it not matter is that once the Zerg realizes, oh, you're targeting my spawning pool, they rebuild it pretty quickly. So there's a limited amount of time where they can't make Lings. And while that sometimes can end games, if they already have Lings, they can turn them into Banelings and usually extend the grace period, you know, between spawning pools. But yeah, that spawn pool is not replaced at all quickly. Ryung's 3-3 has been done. He's not quite maxed out, but he got a lot of room to play with. 3rd CC is now his main. creep spread was never really all that impressive off to this very far right side to begin with, so Ryung's not taking advantage of that. And the tank count isn't the most impressive on the front lines, but at 5, it's pretty damn decent. And soO actually was not particularly quick to that hive, so he does not have Vipers in play, so he really doesn't have a super awesome way of dealing with this. If he was maxed out, completely maxed out, he might be able to kind of get that surround again going, but he's not maxed out. He was struggling to do so without a spawning pool after all, and he is going to go ahead and say, I'm not able to defend that. You know, I got no creep spread, I'm not maxed out, I'm not prepared, you've logged yourself in too tightly, let's give that up. Tries to go for a run by, denied. Still dealing with a drop in the main too. Now it's gunning for the hive. Not sure it's going to be able to kill it. Units of the Zerg are responding. Hydras and Banelings aplenty should be enough to save that hive for sure. But now the attack on this base as well. Ryung not clearing up the creep spread though. It's giving soO a lot of room. Obviously the boost to the Baneling speed being most important, but also the visions. The Zerg player knows exactly what the setup is like, and soO this time is ready to go. He's got that creep to work with. He's got his Lings reinforcing. The Banelings trying to get those connections actually mostly fail, and the Hydras are taking some serious losses against the Liberators and once again the reinforcing Marines. This is the second time that Ryung was like, oh, I'm low on Marines. Just kidding. 30 Marines show up. Forced to back away as those emergency Banelings come into the battle, but they are not enough. Nice little concave there from Ryung, takes care of all of those backup Banelings, and soO does not have any more. This is often how a Zerg crumbles. They might have enough army, they might be actually running the Terran low on units, but if you don't have Banelings and they have 15 Marines, that's like almost what it takes is just 15 Marines and medevacs, you could still die. Ryung's not going to push the issue, realizing there's still a little bit too much to go through before he would actually cut the head off the snake, so he backs away, figuring that soO would eventually replace those Banelings, which soO did. soO is also finally getting to those Vipers, so that's really going to help out with some of these tank positions, as well as the Liberators. Liberator is not particularly effective against Lings, right? The shooting on a Ling is not the best use of a Liberator. Very effective against Hydras. But if you can just take them out of the equation entirely, well, that's the best scenario, right? And all it takes is one abduct and they unsiege. Not to mention the tanks. Tanks are also very important to get rid of. Another hatchery goes down. soO actually taking a southern base that is closer to his opponent is always concerning. Now it's been figured out too, so it wouldn't take too much for Ryung to go down there. Remember that Ryung does not technically have 4 bases, guys. He has 2 orbitals and a planetary. So that's less scans, less mules, less SCV production if he has to reproduce them. And he's starting to maybe be able to get to a 5th base, or a 5th, quote-unquote, but only if he took the time to invest into it, and that's the decision that he would have to make, right? Either continue trying to max out and push the guy once again, or try and turn this into some type of macro game after really never being set up for a pure late game macro game. soO's not exactly comfortable in the amount of bases that he has. 72 drones, yes, but only 2 bases mining. So he's not really eager to take an engagement, because he won't be able to remax afterwards at all. He is finishing up his 3-3. He got the Carapace a little while ago, but is also finishing up that melee. Has adrenal glands, so if a run by or something ever occurred, it would be nasty to clean up. But soO's not exactly able to figure out, you know, he can't exactly just throw everything down. You can't go into Ultralisk Cavern, you can't add a Nidus Worm and a Lurker Den and just everything. If he had that time, if he had those resources, it would be an excellent maneuver, I think. But he does not. They're both just trying to find all those pennies to max out. And hopefully faster than their opponent. Ryung is moving his natural command center at this point over to this base. It means he can lift, so it won't die to Banelings. That's cool, but obviously means there's less helping to defend such a situation. It is a fantastic spread of units. It's going to be very difficult for soO to break this if he ever decides that he can. But again, I think first as a Zerg player, you want to make sure you have those bases mining. This is still a very dangerous break from soO, because if he loses this battle, the mining base will be goner, but it's maybe going to work out. Couple of the Vipers, Blinding Clouds really helping against those tanks, but the Marines once again able to spread farther and farther back, do mostly, well not mostly, but a lot of them do survive the engagement and looking to immediately return the favor. The command center did get taken down, unfortunately, no lift there. Hydra's been a target fired at as well, but there's the immediate clapback. And that's what I was talking about. That's why that was dangerous. If soO didn't straight up win with that, he's losing a base that he really needs to mine. Last Baneling does go down. Medevac number still healthy enough to heal up these Marines, even against the Hydras. You can see that soO thought that that might be enough Hydras to out-DPS the healing. So he put his drones back on mining, but then realized it wasn't enough. But here come the reinforcements. Lings and Banelings this time around. Take down the tank, take down the Marines. soO lost a base, Ryung lost a base. But soO actually mining off of at least one healthy one and reinforcing with just enough means that soO is in fact going to take game 3. But what a roller coaster. I was not that much of a believer in the way that Ryung was pushing, but 8 racks is always tenacious. It's always, I think it's full of potential, right? A Zerg player is in a really delicate position to defend. It's not just a simple like lol A move. You know, they got to choose their timing really accurately. But even though soO did his best to defend, it was still so close. I'm sure the smallness of the map wasn't helping. And he ends up pulling a rabbit out of the hat almost. Actually wins a very scrappy game, which Terrans are notoriously famous for doing well in. And it might actually come back to that kill on the 3rd orbital, which probably shouldn't have happened. But that's it. GG. soO moves on in the Korean Open Cup. I think he faced like Hero or something next. And Ryung has to try again next week. So thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you enjoyed it. Bye. It wasn't live. It was replays. It's not from Katowice, though. It's from the Open Cup.